What's the craziest thing you or your ex did after the divorce? Story one. This was from when I was a kid and my parents were going through a divorce. My dad was very manipulative, physically and emotionally abusive, and involved in illegal activities. Even after my mom was finally able to get out, he still had visitation rights. His family kept on urging my sister and me, still under 10 years old, to try to convince my mom to talk to him. She finally did try to talk to him when she came to pick us up at the police station, where it was agreed to meet when he had his time with us. They immediately got into an argument and he started throwing one of his temper tantrums. Grabbed my mom in front of a police officer from the LAPD and tried to harm her. The officer grabbed him. He let go of my mom with a look of pure terror on his face. I think that was the day I realized he was dangerous and didn't want anything else to do with him or his difficult family. Story two. Kidnapped my three boys from my house when I went on my first post-divorce date. Our trusted babysitter was with them. I left dinner ready and the kids bathed and already in their pajamas. I left for the movie theater when I got a text from my babysitter saying she was sorry for not doing the dishes after dinner. So I texted back, "That's okay. I can do dishes later, but you've got a couple of hours as well." The movie hasn't started yet. She was at home when my ex-husband showed up, lied and said he was supposed to have the boys that night and that I had said it was okay. I was livid. I knew he was a bit unstable, but I had no idea he was capable of this. I stepped out of the theater, called him, and he said, "If you're going to be dating strangers and endangering the lives of my kids, I will take them." I called the police. They filed a report. We went to court, and he was found in contempt for violating our parenting plan. Story three. This is hilarious. My ex-boyfriend also pretended to have been hit by a car after our breakup, but was at least cautious enough to do it via text, rather than trying to act it out on the phone. I asked him to send me a photo of himself in the hospital, a hospital bracelet or anything that would prove he was actually in the ER. He didn't respond for about 20 minutes, then sent a selfie of himself standing outside of the hospital, which was coincidentally almost exactly 20 minutes away from his favorite bar. I questioned why he wasn't inside the hospital since he had claimed to have arrived there about 45 minutes ago, and he claimed to have already been evaluated, treated, and released without any discharge paperwork he could show me. Story four. Prior to divorce, he established a pattern of asking me to sleep with someone else, usually MFF threesomes, usually friends of his, mine, or ours. Getting increasingly demanding and moody until I conceded, then reacting with extreme insecurity, jealousy, possessiveness, and a need for reassurance afterward until it happened again. It destroyed me as well as all of my in-person friendships, and I still don't understand why he needed to go through that cycle over and over, or why I didn't leave sooner. To clarify, there is nothing wrong with swinging polyamory or ethical non-monogamy, but he really just wanted an on-demand situation, couldn't take no for an answer, and could not stand the thought of me having feelings for anyone else, yet consistently thought I was waiting to cheat on him or abandon him. Shortly before I filed for divorce, he broke into my apartment twice, once because he wasn't done talking, and then because the apartment complex director told him I couldn't legally kick him out. Acted inappropriately while I was sleeping, called the police and child services because I blocked him after close to 24 hours of nonstop messaging, and threw a couple of punches and an energy drink at the still concussed TBI survivor he'd chosen as my most recent partner. As if any of this was that person's fault, then he confronted me in the backyard while refusing to leave and told the police I had attacked him. I filed a restraining order and for divorce on the same day. 4 months after our divorce was finalized and he was granted full custody of our 3 kids for every school vacation, he decided to move halfway across the country to live with his mother. She's still taking care of him. His kids aren't particularly interested in talking to him and haven't seen him in over a year. I offered to pay for him to stay here over the summer to see them, but he said no. This reflects his level of engagement with his kids prior to divorce as well. I don't doubt he loves them, but he rarely chose to spend time with them because it was stressful. The police, lawyers, child support, office employees, and the judge have all responded the same way to his endless victim claims. A tired sigh, a roll of the eyes. He continues to believe his situation is everyone else's fault and totally unique. He follows me online and has quoted some of my posts in court. Story 5. My ex-husband started dating his stepmom, who had been in his life since he was 11 years old. His stepmom and he are still together almost 5 years later. His stepmom confessed her love for my ex to his dad a few years ago, and they have since divorced. The dad is now dating a 21-year-old. I know all of this because I'm still close friends with my ex-husband's sister. It's so messed up, and I'm so grateful I left him when I did. Edit, I won't say where it all unfolded because of small towns, but they are all from New Jersey. I am not. The father and my ex-husband don't speak. Basically, everyone in that family except the stepmom obviously dislikes my ex-husband and has mostly cut him out of their lives. It may have been a little bit of grooming, but if you met my ex-husband, you'd see he's all around a plotting, manipulative person. So I think it was the other way around. He constantly talked during our marriage about how attractive she was. If any film companies are following, I'd happily play the non-nude narrator to a cinematic universe for the right price. Thanks for all the awards upvotes and comments. It makes me feel nice to get that off my chest. Don't marry unstable people. No. Story 6. She had our dog euthanized, then lied and said he died of natural causes. Granted, the dog was old and blind, but she pleaded that she wanted a weekend with him. And then the next night sent me a fake text saying he passed away during the night around 3 a.m. because he coughed and then just stopped breathing. That wasn't true. I found out later after contacting the vet she brought him to that she had spoken poorly about me, saying the dog was suffering and needed to be put to sleep because he was in agony and that I was supposedly letting him suffer. She had him put to sleep about 3 hours after taking him home. I never got to say goodbye because of that. Story 7. She got custody of our 3 kids, received 70% of my take-home pay for child support, and forced me to move into the barracks. I was in the USAF. Then she immediately moved out of state without telling me, despite the divorce decree requiring my consent, guaranteeing I would have little contact with my kids. That's not the crazy part. The crazy part is that just a few years later, she decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore. She joined a traveling carnival. I think she liked one of the ride operators and left the girls on their own without telling me or the girls beforehand. She called my oldest daughter a few days later to tell her to call me. They hadn't called me before that because they had apparently grown used to their mother disappearing for days at a time. Some have asked what happened since. This was decades ago. My children are all grown and married with their own children. They all learned after coming to live with me that I wasn't the person their mother had led them to believe I was. And they all agreed to be adopted as adults by the light of my life, my wife, whom I would never have met if I hadn't been divorced. Only one of my children has any contact with their mother, mainly because my daughter still lives near where she grew up. That's where her husband and his family live, so that's where she will stay. The best outcome of all of my children had the best example in the world of how not to be a parent. And as a result, all 5 of my grandchildren are having the best childhoods possible. Story 8. Final straw that led to the divorce: got drunk and drove her car into the middle of the desert, sent her friend a picture of the GPS and said I didn't love her, so I wouldn't come and look for her. She wouldn't answer my calls but kept calling her friends, saying I didn't care. I looked for 2 hours before going back home because I needed to work in the morning. She came home and started banging things around and came into our room and threw her phone at me saying I didn't love her. Punched me in the face multiple times and went to jail. After I filed for divorce, she lost it. CPS wouldn't let her kids stay at the house because of the DV charge against her, so they stayed at her parents' house. She purposely stayed at the house so that I couldn't see my kids. I refused to be alone with her afterward for fear that she would hurt herself and blame me. So I always went to the house with someone if I needed anything. She got tired of this and decided to just remove everything from the house while I was at work. I mean, everything that wasn't in my kids' bedroom she took out of the house. Curtains, ceiling fans, all of the furniture, minus the dining table, which I don't think she had room for. I thought, well, this is terrible, but at least she's gone. So I changed the locks. She broke in and stole the locks the next day while I was at work left. Nothing but the holes in the doors to swing open in the wind. Took the window locks, cut the power cord to the garage door opener, took the blender that I borrowed from my mom, and popped the air mattress that I borrowed to sleep on. Then she flipped off the main breaker to the house. She swore to the judge that someone else must have done it. Story 9, while we were still married, she became pregnant with the child of the person she was having an affair with, who was also married. She had the idea that he was going to leave his wife and they were going to get married. She got a lawyer and filed for divorce. I hired a lawyer too. The problem was that he worked for his wife's father, who was setting him up to take over when he retired. He realized that getting a divorce would mean his career was over, So he confessed everything to his wife and begged for her forgiveness. His wife took him back, and he ended the relationship with my wife. Seeing that her plans were ruined, she claimed that I was the father, which was impossible, because by that time, we hadn't been together for more than a year before conception. This did not stop her from telling everyone who would listen that it was my child. She had her lawyer drop the divorce proceedings. I told my lawyer to continue with me as the plaintiff and that I wanted to dispute paternity. I moved out. She started stalking me. She showed up at my job and tried to get in. I work as a civilian in R&D at a military base. The MPs did not tolerate her behavior and ended up detaining her when she tried to run past the gate. She called me at work to bail her out or something, but I told her that whatever she had done was not my problem and hung up. I also was able to get a restraining order, which she violated multiple times. She asked for everything, both cars, the entire house, and contents savings, my retirement account, and 7 years of spousal support. I offered no support in half of the assets. If she wanted the house, she would have to buy me out and refinance in her name only. When the baby was born, she tried to put my name on the birth certificate anyway, but I had already successfully disputed paternity, so that didn't go over well. She had to go after the real father, who was definitely less than happy to see her. In the end, we split the assets, 50-50, sold the house, and she received no spousal support. I don't know if she was able to get any support for the child from him or not. She called me a few times after the divorce wanting to get together and talk. The calls were in violation of the restraining order, but I never reported them. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was offered a new job on the other side of the country. I took it and never told anyone outside of my family where I was going. Almost all of our mutual friends believed her when she claimed the baby was mine and portrayed me as the bad person, so I didn't really feel the need to tell them anything. Story 10. My ex has done a lot of strange things. Thankfully, most of it not aimed at me. While we were separated and working on our divorce, he would come to me to whine about relationship issues with my cousin, with whom he had an affair and for whom he left me. Mind you, he had moved in with not just her, but her common-law husband, and then was upset by how many other boyfriends she had. This is my cousin, who has more children's fathers than she has children. 2 of her children are simultaneously half-brothers and cousins. She has never been known for her loyalty, in other words, but he claimed to have been in love with her since they were children, and this was supposed to make her return his affections. Among the best witnessed from a distance moments were him getting jealous of her visiting her husband and running her off the road in his work van, and generally hanging around her instead of taking jobs, to the extent that there were trainees making more money than he was after more than a year, and he was eventually invited to resign or be fired. Then there was the time he was doing armed security and upset that taking our children on a first date to Austin didn't go well. Had an argument with his girlfriend at the time, not my cousin, but the ex-wife of a different cousin, and drove to her house in his work vehicle to threaten her. This resulted in firing a restraining order and the loss of his right to carry a gun. Then there was the girlfriend, who insisted that if he really loved her, he would move into the homeless shelter with her. So he fabricated being kicked out of his parents' house and spent the required months sleeping outside on the shelter's patio before intake. Then spent years longer than the relationship living in the shelter, only finally leaving to move in with a woman he had met a month earlier after asking our children's permission. They felt they had no choice. Basically, it has been 13 years of reeling from one relationship to the next, all overlapping, and the kids pulled into them from the very first second. He's currently trying desperately to find another girlfriend to move in with, as the current one is moving to Virginia with a new boyfriend. This after loud arguments about his internet habits and relationship issues, and naturally blaming me for the fact that his 2 oldest children refused to talk to him at all. 2 of my shortcomings as a wife, by the way, were being too classy. He quoted a song lyric to me and not providing the drama he thought was necessary in a relationship. Story 11. We were living in a different state, and she wanted to move back to her home state a year into our marriage. I really had nothing tying me down in that state, so I was willing to move if that's really what she wanted. It had been about 6 months into the move, and she cheated on me with a coworker while I was working full-time and trying to finish my bachelor's degree. She told me that she didn't feel the same way about me and that she needed to move out to do some thinking. It drove me crazy trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I had a suspicion about that coworker, but I didn't have proof. I checked our phone account online, and sure enough, they were talking every night after work while I was out working. I followed her one time, and sure enough, she was going to this guy's house. I confronted her about it, and she finally admitted it. They continued dating after we divorced, and I was able to move on with my life. She ended up getting pregnant by this guy, and he disappeared before their baby was even born. Karma definitely came back around after the difficult time she put me through, alone in a new state, with no friends or family around. Story 12. I was naive and put my name on a truck my ex was paying off through the dealership when we were together. He got so mad at me and told everyone he knew that I was trying to take his truck from him, despite the fact that I had my own vehicle payments. The salesman at the dealership said I could transfer the title after he made payments for 2 years, which was a complete lie. It had to be completely paid off before a transfer. I tried to find a better way to let him have the truck and pay it off legally, but he refused to cooperate. I really didn't think I could trust him to make 800 plus monthly payments after the way things ended between us, and I ended up being right. We were splitting a cell phone bill at the time. He was paying me for his portion until about a year later when his overspending addiction caught up with him. He stopped paying, leaving me stuck with the bill. Imagine if I had trusted him with the truck too. Anyway, I ended up having to sell the truck back to another dealership and only got $13,000 toward the $37,000 that was still owed. I was prepared to get sued or have my wages garnished. Unexpectedly, my mom paid it off. I am obviously paying her back now, but wow, what a mess. Story 13. I had a 1969 Dodge Power Wagon pickup. No power steering, no power brakes, 4-speed manual transmission. A beast of a truck and a beast to drive. When we divorced, she took my truck. The judge said that since she was giving me custody of our 3 kids and I would need the family car, it seemed only right that she got the truck. 3 weeks after finalizing, she was going down a muddy road and ditched it, damaging some of the front suspension. She called the local guy with a tow truck, and he towed it back to where she was living. Since she needed a car, he told her he would trade her a Chevy Citation for the broken-down truck, which she agreed to. He then called me and sold me the truck for the same cheap price he originally had on the Citation. I loved it. Had to spend a couple of $100 on repairs, but she was very upset when she learned I got my truck back. Story 14. Immediately got married, maybe within 3 weeks was engaged in a very public way, and in 3 months had adopted her child and came crawling back 3 years later because she was codependent, broke, and struggling as a mother and wife. Rejected, and they're still together. And I presume miserable and struggling now. Edit, since I'm being told I'm salty and should love thy neighbor, let's unpack why I'm not and won't. My ex and I met in the Army. I was cheated on the entirety of our relationship and their deployment. Unbeknownst to me, I refused to have a baby until my ex got therapy for severe PTSD and refused to buy a house in my name we couldn't afford. I was effectively ghosted. Didn't know my ex was home from deployment until they pulled up to my house to pick up their stuff, with a future wife right there in the new car my ex bought with deployment money. While I struggled financially, someone must have told my ex I could accuse them of infidelity, which is not permitted in the Army. And I fielded hateful calls and texts from my ex and friends, and threats from the new wife for months. In the twist, everyone who's ever been to MEPS could expect the wife was a dependent spouse who pulled them into bankruptcy and stole my ex's identity to take out credit cards. I was accused at first, but the truth came out chaos. My ex was medically discharged, lost, the house went broke, and now works a manual job supporting a grown woman who doesn't even have $10 to buy her baby juice. Every few years until I changed my number, I'd get a call or text from my ex's area code, sniffly messages inviting me on vacation or trying to gauge how much money I was making. I've spent thousands and half a decade in therapy unpacking my role in this. Rough upbringing, clung to the first person who loved me, moved too fast in typical early career military fashion. My gut knew, long before my heart and brain caught on, that I was with someone who could play my emotions perfectly and would leave for the first exciting thing. I'm far removed from feelings of hurt or bitterness now. The way I see it, life gave us both what we wanted. I wanted to heal and grow before taking on a mortgage and becoming a mom. My ex wanted a lavish life immediately, no matter the cost. It would have been nice to end differently, but hey, worse things have happened to better people. I occasionally see the car they purchased in my city and chuckle to myself. I send a small prayer that my ex stays far away and enjoy the beautiful life I've built. So yeah, no thanks to the negative comments and messages. Maybe if some people found peace themselves, they wouldn't be so bitter. Story 15. So after we got divorced, she immediately started dating a person who was part of a larger extremist group. I will give him credit where it's due. He asked for my permission to date her since we were still married but separated, which caught me off guard. He got my full blessing ending with us discussing her red flags, and we shared a laugh over that with a parting. She's your problem now. Fast forward about 4 years later, and she calls me crying her eyes out. I had changed phone numbers twice since then, so I had no idea how she was able to call me, never really figured that part out. She tried to explain to me between breaths from crying how she had made mistakes and needed me back, which was a first for me to hear. At that time, I was very happy living with my then girlfriend, who treated me wonderfully. And I had a life that I only thought was a fantasy back when I was married. Her voice brought back a lot of memories, and all I could say was, "I'm sorry, I can't." Fast forward 2 more years, and my then girlfriend and I had gone our separate ways as amicably as possible. The guy who was with my ex-wife contacted me on Facebook, which I used to keep up with old friends and family, asking if I had a minute and walk me through his current situation. He ended up having 2 kids with her, and she waited until they were both old enough to walk, then literally took them and fled to a different state. I only knew about the latter part when she reached out to me a while after she fled, but she was smart enough to leave out exactly where she was. She wanted help, which I assume was financial and general support, given that she had a coordinated group actively searching for her. Since I was no longer naive, I politely declined and wished her luck. I have no idea what came of all that since her Facebook account is gone. It was satisfying for me knowing how big of a bullet I dodged, and it felt like a drama show, where the last season ended abruptly, leaving me in suspense. I really want to know what happened, but I don't want to get involved. I don't even know who to root for, because I don't know what really went down or what would happen if he caught up to her. The best situation would be that the kids are okay and well taken care of. But being stuck between 2 unstable people tells me that's more hopeful than realistic. This experience taught me that it's perfectly okay to look at a situation and truthfully say, you know what, this is neither my fault nor my problem, and walk away. Story 16. Not a divorcee, but when my parents were getting divorced, my mom walked out on my dad with zero warning to anybody in the family. They actually had a really amicable divorce, to the point that my dad even still teased my mom by sending her a card on their 22nd wedding anniversary a few weeks before the divorce was finalized, just so he could claim he'd never forgotten their anniversary. Sending her cards on her birthday, Valentine's Day, and even their anniversary for the first several years after their divorce, just because he knew it made her new partner nervous that they might get back together. The 2 guys actually got along okay. My dad just liked teasing him occasionally and had already moved on from the idea of ever reconciling. It was genuinely just a prank on the poor guy. My dad even kind of hoped they would get married and fully close that chapter. But now her partner is in the advancing stages of dementia, and that ship has pretty much sailed. Story 17. So about 6 months after the divorce, I had moved into a small apartment and had a date over at my place. I hadn't heard from my ex in a few months, and those communications had always been very cordial. Anyways, my date and I were watching a movie and cuddling on the couch when there was a knock at the door. I figured it was one of my friends and just opened it without checking first. It was my ex-wife. She pushed the door open and came in. No idea how she found out where I lived, as I had never told her. I suspect it was through a mutual friend. Anyways, she comes in causing a scene because I had a date over. I told her it was none of her business, but she threatened the girl I was with. The date ended up leaving after a few minutes of dealing with the situation. She then proceeded to pull a knife from my kitchen drawer and threatened to harm herself. I stayed calm, got the knife away from her, and we talked for a while where she said she missed me and so on. She treated me terribly when we were together. She then went to use my bathroom, which was in my bedroom. When she didn't come back for a while, I went to check, fearing she had done something drastic. Well, she had done something, but not what I expected. She was lying in my bed, fully unclothed. When I walked in, I said, "What are you doing?" She proceeded to say, "Don't you want this? Don't you miss this?" When I said no, she tried to throw herself at me and force herself onto me. I resisted and pushed her away. This back and forth went on for what seemed like forever with her, continuously trying to remove my clothing and kiss me. Finally, she got the hint and left. Craziest day ever. Story 18. My ex was 10 years my senior, addicted to shopping and racking up installment debt, and also diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. We hit a real rocky spot, and she ultimately called the police on me in my own home to try and get them to force me to leave. The house and mortgage were in my name only. I ultimately grabbed some things and stayed with my parents for the duration of the divorce proceedings. I got my lawyer and moved forward. She ran to her mom in her 60s and played the innocent victim. I had just started a new job a week prior when I was served with a protection order falsely claiming verbal, mental, and physical abuse. I never laid a finger on her and didn't even raise my voice. I grew up with a high-functioning alcoholic father, so I was always a go-along, get-along type. She hired the most prominent divorce lawyer in the city. Her mother helped her. We had a court date, and although my attorney had originally tried to work with hers, they stopped responding. At court, we discovered she showed up unrepresented, so my attorney mentioned to the judge that she could handle the agreement, and the judge allowed it if both parties agreed. My attorney had the two of us sit in a room and talk for a bit. She asked if we could patch things up. Keep in mind this was 6 months later with no communication. I definitely didn't want that. She was so toxic that I no longer had the emotional capacity to try and keep her stable, and I was losing my own stability. I had to save myself. We settled everything with cash to get her out of my life. When I returned to my house, everything was strewn everywhere. Clothes, books, magazines, papers dumped out. While I was away, she got involved with a new boyfriend, not really a boy, an overweight former football player who smoked in the house and let a cat destroy the furniture. Mutual friends explained that while I was gone, she was convinced I was sneaking into the basement to blow up the house using gas lines. Ultimately, her own son came to me years later and said he appreciated everything I had done for him and even his mom, and that he felt I was more of a father to him than his biological father had ever been during the 10 years we were married. I have no idea where she is today, but I truly hope she got the help she needed and is leading a stable life. As for her attorney, he was the top divorce attorney in town with radio ads and a prominent firm. It turns out my ex was able to retain him because her mother had a relationship with him and blackmailed him into taking the case. His wife and the other partners found out, bought him out of the firm, and his wife filed for divorce as well. Story number 19. We divorced because I am gay. Afterwards, she remarried twice. Her second husband, Jack, passed away. Then she remarried for the third time, including me, to Randall, who was her worst choice of all. She eventually ran him off. We decided to vacation together to New England, Montreal, and Quebec City to check some states off my list of states, visited all of them now except Hawaii. We did the trip like a survey course, spending one night in many different towns and cities. For instance, we spent one night in Millinocket, Maine, and climbed Mount Katahdin the next day. Later, we took an 11-day cruise to Alaska together in 2005. We had divorced in 1981. My ex passed away in 2009 from cancer. Of course, there were painful times and heartaches associated with our divorce after 18 years of marriage and the birth of 2 sons. But time can heal a lot of wounds, and former spouses can appreciate the part of the journey they took together, even after moving on to their next adventures. Story 20. I could write a book about the antics of my 2 ex-husbands. I swear it would be interesting because I literally have to pace out these types of stories for people in my life so they don't think I am making them up. Anyway, here's the one I think is the most interesting and easy to sum up. While separated, my ex had a key made for my Jeep. Don't know how, maybe he had done it long before in preparation for a divorce someday. And he put flowers in it one night with a card that said, "I've been watching you. Love, Scott." I worked at a UPS hub at the time and had interactions with many people. Some, yes, were named Scott. I found this in my car one night after my afternoon shift in the dimly lit parking lot. I freaked out, obviously called him, as I'm sure he wanted, and he came over that night to make sure I would be all right from Scott. Only after speaking to my brother about it the next day, he also worked at UPS. He 100% felt like it was my ex and told me to call his bluff and say I was having UPS pull the parking lot tapes. There really weren't any, but I did ask them, had to drum up this whole ordeal at work, and felt like an idiot, and that they would prosecute the person with harassment or trespassing. He confessed to me and said it was just a frail attempt to win me back. If I was at all on the fence about ending the relationship, this solidified it for me. Story 21. Not me, but my parents. My mom and dad got a divorce after a really long time of trying. My dad has substance abuse issues and has only gotten worse over the years. My mom finally had enough and told him to choose between substances or his family, and he didn't choose us. After my mom filed for divorce, my dad stole $6,000 from her that she had been saving to go to the dentist. She had previously struggled with addiction too, so her teeth were in poor condition. My dad also used me to get back at my mom by making my life miserable and starting unnecessary fights. This all came to a head one night after I got home from volunteering at the library around 9 p.m. My mom called me and I told her where I was. My dad came barreling out of his room, got in my face, and was screaming so hard that he was spitting in my face. When my mom got home, she reminded him that A, I was volunteering 10 minutes away, B, I didn't have a curfew because I was 18, C, it wasn't a school night, and D, I was a good kid. He said he didn't care and that I had to accept any punishment he gave me regardless of their agreed upon rules. He continued to do this until I was forced to move out because every day became a screaming match. He would wake up and immediately start harassing me, and when he got home from work, it would start again. He even threatened to hit me a few times. Eventually, when he tried to raise his hand to me, I told him that if he ever laid a single finger on me, my mom or my siblings, I would defend us. He never tried to hit me again after that. Story 22. We became roommates. We were always better friends than spouses. Our divorce was more a relief than an ending. It works for everyone, and our daughter loves having us both in the same house. Edit to answer questions below. As for how it came to be, we got amicably divorced in 2013. We lived separately after the divorce with our daughter splitting time between two homes. We remained the kind of friends who got together for cookouts and board game nights, etc. My ex got remarried and bought a house with her new husband. He turned out to be abusive, so they got divorced. We couldn't afford to keep the house on our own, so since I had a lease ending, at the time 2016, I offered to move in and pay rent. The arrangement worked out well, so last year, to remove the ex-husband from the house deed, we refinanced it with both of us as owners. I don't expect it to last forever, but at least as long as our daughter benefits. Every decision we made was with her best interest at heart. We remain supportive friends and awesome co-parents. We have frequent family dinners, movie nights, and game nights, but we also have our own lives. Our friend group Venn diagram is mostly a circle. As for dating and other partners, it helps that I am non-monogamous. I identify as a relational anarchist, so I only date other non-monogamous or polyamorous people. Those people tend to be unfazed by an ex-partner in the house. I wouldn't pursue a relationship with someone who had a big problem with it. As for future partners being RA, I have no intention of getting married again or cohabitating with another partner. I just don't do traditional relationships anymore. I know people say never, but probably never. I'm not going to preach about toxic monogamy, but it is a thing. I find it concerning that the default assumption is that people are expected to hate their exes. That often comes from dragging out relationships past their healthy end until everyone resents each other. I'll admit my living situation is unusual, but it's healthy. When I tell people, I get the occasional, "I could never do that," but more often, "That's weird but cool." Story 23. Not me, but a colleague. He got completely taken advantage of in the divorce, and because he worked 60 hours a week in finance, the judge gave him limited time with his kids. He spiraled and started hanging out at college bars every night, hitting on anyone he could occasionally succeeding. He started telling everyone at work how lame we all were because we weren't living his exciting lifestyle while he was putting in maybe 30 hours a week until he eventually got fired from his 7-figure job. Then he went full rock star, bleached his hair, grew a goatee, he was 42, and started riding a really flashy Harley bagger, full-on cheeseball. This was 7 years ago, and the last I heard, he was struggling with substance issues and living in Arizona. He hasn't seen his kids in years. I bet he's the only guy in the trailer park with an MBA from McCombs. Story 24. This is my husband's story with his first wife. He bought a house 5 years before they ever met. When they married, she started cheating on him shortly after, but he didn't know. The person she was cheating with was his best friend. She and her boyfriend came up with an idea to convince my husband to put her name on the title and refinance the house. This was back during the last housing boom. She ended up spending the money they pulled out of the house on herself and her boyfriend. During this time, my husband found out about their relationship. He kicked her out and started divorce proceedings. She had legal connections, so she basically took him to the cleaners. In the decree, it was stated that he had to refinance and get her name off the house. By that time, the housing market had crashed badly, and he was unable to refinance even after trying several times. A few years went by, and she and the same boyfriend got married and wanted to buy a house, so she wanted her name off the old house. She took her ex-husband to court for contempt of the divorce decree since he hadn't been able to remove her name from the house. He went to court to plead his case with proof of his attempts to refinance. However, her well-connected parents knew the judge, and he was ruled in contempt. He had to pay all associated fees, pay her off the house, cover all lawyer fees, and spend 5 days in jail. Funny thing is, after he was released, he was in a perfect position to file for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, including the house refinance loan and lawyer fees in the bankruptcy. Who do you think the banks and lawyers went after for the money then? Certainly not him anymore. Story 25. I had a 3-year relationship while living and working in a different country. Eventually, as my visa was running out, my partner and I got married to stay together in his country and keep the relationship going. We had a home together. I was in love, or so I thought. Planning children, had a fantastic job. Life seemed pretty perfect. I achieved short-term residency and was only 6 months away from getting my permanent citizenship. That's when I discovered that my then husband had been cheating with someone else for close to half a year. We'll call her EB for extreme betrayer. I separated from my husband immediately, and he moved in with EB. Good riddance. However, my ex and I agreed to keep the appearance of our marriage going until I got my citizenship, after which we would file for divorce. But EB got pregnant, and she hated that my ex was still married to me. With only 3 months to go until I would have secured my citizenship, EB reported our situation to the authorities. Because of this, we were investigated, and my citizenship application and residency were revoked. I lost my work visa, lost my dream job, and was deported from my country of choice. Banned from that country for 5 years for fraudulent visa applications too. She literally forced me out of the country just to feel victorious. Story 26. Hello, I've been divorced twice. The first wife was the difficult one. Here's some of the things she did to me. This covers not just after the divorce, but also what led up to it, before and after. It began with minor things like punching and kicking me whenever she felt jealous. Her violence escalated to slashing at me with kitchen knives over the years. I eventually had to hide the knives so she wouldn't do that, but she found a pencil and tried to stab me in the stomach one day. She missed her intended target and stabbed me in the abdomen instead. She would pretend to overdose on pills to get my attention. When I told her that I wanted a divorce and served her with the divorce papers, she would stay next to my bed during the night. Whenever she saw me close my eyes, she would kick and stomp on me to keep me awake the whole night. This continued over many days until I finally had to move back in with my parents. I gave her 2 months to leave the apartment, which was mine. This eventually ended with me having to legally force her out after the divorce was finalized. When I thought it was finally over, she broke into my apartment while I was at work and stole some of my most cherished belongings to upset me. She inflicted injuries on herself and went to the police, falsely accusing me of hurting her. She even sent 2 men to my apartment to attack me one day. She manipulated the family of my best friend into believing that I was a terrible and abusive husband who needed intervention. Story 27. I got divorced in 2017. My wife and her new husband then stole my identity because security questions are based on things like where you lived or which company financed your car answers she knew after 12 years together. It's now 2021. She's still finding ways to interfere in my life. I keep the bare minimum in my name with everything else under my current wife's name. I've had to fight with credit unions to ensure they wouldn't unfreeze my accounts unless they received a copy of my birth certificate along with my PIN. That's right. They were able to unfreeze my accounts by answering those old security questions. I've filed police reports in 4 different counties. I provided all the evidence and pointed them exactly where to go, but the police didn't act. I filed complaints with the Post Office Cyber Crimes Divisions and other agencies. Social Security refuses to issue me a new number. Yes, I'm still very frustrated. I've never hated anyone or anything before. I'm usually a very calm and relaxed person, but I can honestly and without regret say that I have no love lost for her. Story 28. Not my story, but my dad's. My dad divorced a woman in 1975 under normal circumstances. They didn't love each other anymore, and she became an alcoholic. But they did conceive one child together. The woman was always vindictive and a little unstable. She made it very difficult for my dad to see the child after the divorce. It turns out she was having an affair with a neighbor the whole time, and they eloped to Hawaii without telling my dad a thing. My father was devastated. He didn't find out they were in Hawaii until 2 years later, when my dad's sister ran into the ex-wife's mother at a store and was told about it. My dad was only 31 then and didn't have the resources or know-how to track them down in the 1975 to 80 era. His words, with no internet, no mobile phones, and limited ways to communicate, he feared he would never find them. Time passed and the idea of what could have been started to fade. My dad ended up having children in almost every decade with different wives. 6 kids in total, including me, all with women he was married to at some point. All of us knew the story about the child he lost, and it remained one of his biggest regrets. 2 days ago, I decided to try to find this missing sibling using a site called Truthfinder. Knowing the names of the parents and the child's name, I managed to isolate a possible relative. After hours of digging through addresses and phone numbers, I finally left a vague voicemail to avoid revealing too much too soon. Thankfully, she called me back. I explained everything, and amazingly, she was happy for her brother. This long-lost sibling had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. He had found out he was adopted at 15 after stumbling upon papers during a move. When he confronted his mother, she denied it, leading to years of bitterness and confusion. The sister had secretly salvaged photos and documents the mother had tried to destroy, helping piece together the truth for him. Sadly, the mother passed away from cancer in 2017. The neighbor, however, is still alive, and the son is close to him. Now my dad and his son are in contact and are planning to speak this Father's Day weekend. The sister has been amazing in helping them connect. The son is successful, bilingual in Japanese, an avid cyclist, and an all-around wonderful person. He even looks identical to my grandfather at that age. It's uncanny. If you made it this far, thank you for reading my happy story. If you or someone you know has a child they never met, reach out. You never know if they are still hoping for that connection. Story 29. She got her new boyfriend to try and intimidate me into giving up my claim on the property that was jointly in both our names. He called me and demanded to meet. When he wouldn't take no for an answer, I finally agreed, but insisted on meeting at 7 a.m. in a very public cafe. After listening to him berate me for 5 or 10 minutes, he got up and walked out. I thought that was the end of it, but he came back into the cafe with my ex, who was very obviously pregnant, around 7 months maybe. He made her sit at the next table and continued his rant. He didn't let her say a word. When he eventually tried to pay for his untouched coffee, I told the waitresses it was on me. He didn't know anything. He left fuming, pretty much forgetting about my ex who he had left sitting at the other table. I have no idea if they're still together. Even though I initiated the divorce, I felt really sorry for her. She deserved better than that guy. Story 30. My ex-wife stole money and assets from me for years. I never suspected anything because, hey, she was my best friend, and I trusted her. She spent the last year of our marriage dating a total of 4 guys, most of them at the same time. Again, since we worked opposite schedules, I didn't suspect a thing. After I moved out, she told her best friend since 6th grade about everything she did to betray me for basically no other reason than she wanted to see if anything better was out there. He was so disgusted that he said he was going to track me down and tell me everything. She called the police and accused him of a crime. He was later arrested in front of his pregnant fiancée. My ex-wife eventually pleaded it down to a lesser charge so he wouldn't have to go to prison or register as a S offender. She openly admitted that she made the accusation so he couldn't testify for me in divorce court to help me recover my money. Story 31. I caught my ex in 4 affairs, and I documented everything. I'm talking about over 140 pages of phone records, photos, and more. When we went to court, she tried really hard to lie to the judge, claiming I was abusive, should pay alimony, and that I had fabricated the stories about her affairs. I just stood there as my lawyer entered the 140 pages of evidence into the court records. The judge literally laughed her out of the courtroom. She then dragged the divorce out for another 1.5 years, refusing to sign anything, continuing to make up lies. She tried to file for a protective order, contacted my workplace, claiming I was abusive to clients, I'm a social worker, and even opened 3 credit cards in my name, racking up over $3,000 in debt. The worst part was what she did to my social life. She posted private photos of me online, turned the church I grew up in against me, and isolated me from everyone except my family. The stress eventually led me to attempt suicide. She finally stopped showing up to court. The judge signed off on our divorce and barred her from filing any more motions or amended documents. She was ordered to pay the debts she had created, but she never did. My lawyer told me it would cost more to drag her back to court than it would to declare bankruptcy and move on. I still have my job and have even been promoted twice. She's still living in her parents' basement and can't hold down a job. I know this because my brother and her brother still work at the same place. Story 32. My ex went back to California after we separated. I'm from Canada. That's where we lived. She eventually came back and started dating a guy she thought would make me jealous. I'm still not sure why. I was the one who kicked her out for cheating with random people she met online. I didn't care. When it didn't bother me, they split up and she wouldn't go home. But she wasn't a citizen, so she ended up becoming a dancer. I just felt bad for her. I moved on and found someone new after about 6 months and a little bit of dating. Now my second wife and I will have been married for 13 years this July. I knew everything that was going on after we split because all our friends were originally my friends. They wanted to take me to the club where she worked. But that's not my style. I wouldn't put her through that. She eventually went home after one of the mutual friends with whom she had been staying had enough and sent her dad a letter telling him everything she had done. Turns out she had never even told her dad she had been married. She definitely hadn't told him the circumstances of her return to Canada, and most certainly hadn't told him she was working as a dancer. If her dad hadn't ordered her to come home, she probably would have been deported. Today, my forever wife and I spent the day relaxing, smoking, and playing video games together. I prefer this kind of peace over chaos any day. Story 33. The day I moved out of the family home, I stopped near a range of nearby hills and just had an immense amount of energy I needed to get rid of. I got out of the car and went up the nearest hill, straight up through streams and across ditches at first, then into old quarries and straight up the rock walls. I'm no climber, and these were scrambling walls, not climbing walls, but even so, I was just driven to run straight up them at speed. I had to haul myself over the tops of the quarries by pulling on the barbed wire, intended to keep people away from the raw edges and cliffs that I ran up. When I got to the top, I just sat for, I think about 2 hours, completely blanked out. I went back down on the conventional paths and it took a whole lot longer. I've been back since to look, and I have absolutely no idea how I got up there at all. Never mind how I didn't injure myself. It worked though. I felt much more centered afterward. Story 34. I divorced my son's father right after he was born. He was only allowed supervised visits. When my son was 4, he kidnapped him from daycare, called and said, "Say goodbye to your son because it's the last time you'll ever talk to him." His new wife's sister's family took him out of the state somewhere, and he was gone for 2 agonizing weeks before I was able to get him back. The police and courts worked very hard and moved mountains. Those were the 2 longest, most horrific weeks of my life. My son said they told him that his mommy didn't want him anymore, and he never forgot. In high school, he legally changed his last name to mine. He wrote his own pleading to the court, and I cried through the entire case. The judge had us stand and announce to the entire gallery that my son now had 2 birthdays. Years later, his father called me asking for clinical advice because he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. I laughed, said he had always taken up too much oxygen anyway, and that I was glad it was that type of diagnosis because he deserved it. That was one of the best days of my life. Story 35. She showed up in the middle of the day. I was working nights and walked into my house since she still had a key. I woke up to her screaming from downstairs that I needed to take the kids ages 1 and 3. I went downstairs and she put the kids on the floor and walked out the door. A few minutes later, I got a text from her saying, "Tell the kids I love them, and if it comes to it, yeah, I stole your gun." I went to check, and my gun was indeed missing. I called the police. 2 officers came by and took my statement. One I knew from a previous incident. One officer left to go look for her, while the other stayed to start typing up the report. While he was working, she pulled up in her boyfriend's car. The car had side damage, 3 flat tires, and rim damage. As soon as she got out of the car, she was detained and questioned. She was clearly extremely intoxicated and incoherent. She was arrested, booked, and given a breathalyzer test where she blew a 256. The officers found my gun with 2 missing bullets. One of the bullets was found in the car, it had clearly been fired, and the other couldn't be accounted for. She was taken to a mental hospital for 10 days. She never knew what she had been shooting at or why. She ended up being convicted of the most minor DUI charge possible, and it did not impact her ability to see or care for the kids in court. After more similar instances, I have since obtained full legal and physical custody. Story 36. She showed up after she had already moved out and attacked me. I told her, "Get out. Get out now. Get out now, or I'm calling the cops," while fending her off. She continued the attack, so I called 911 while holding her off with my free hand. When the dispatcher asked what the emergency was, I said, "My ex-wife is attacking me." And at that point, she yelled, "Forget you. I'm going to kick your butt." I said, "You know they record these calls, right?" and put her on speakerphone so she could talk directly to the dispatcher. I had already gotten a restraining order against her, and she ended up spending some time in jail. I didn't see her for quite a while because she was using her grandparents as a financial resource and insisting that she was going to get both cars, kick me out of the house, and have me pay for everything, plus alimony, even though we made the same amount of money. Long story short, I used to tell people that the last time I saw her, she was handcuffed and crying in the back of a police car, taking her to jail. And that's exactly how I want to remember her. The restraining order came from threats she and her relatives made against me. Apparently, her infidelities were something I was just supposed to accept. She also stole the mattress off the bed while I was working on Valentine's Day. Story 37. My husband's ex was cheating on him immediately after their daughter was born and wanted my husband gone. He refused to leave his daughter, who was only a few months old at this point, so she left him at home babysitting their daughter, as well as her daughter from a previous relationship whom he was in the process of legally adopting, and went to the police station to make up a story about him being abusive. She came back home with police in tow. He spent a night in jail before his parents were able to bail him out. He had to take anger management courses for months before he could see his daughter again, even though they later proved in court that her allegations were false. Nothing happened to her, not even a warning. She even ended up with primary custody simply because of the court system bias. Oh, and during the time my husband was forced to attend anger management, she locked their dog in the basement, throwing food and water down the stairs. When my husband's parents were finally able to retrieve the dog, he was covered in filth, feces, and urine. They had to bathe him multiple times and shave his beautiful coat off. That poor dog was never the same. Story 38. I have my court papers framed to remind me how manipulative people can convince others they are the wrong party. My ex-husband somehow convinced his lawyer that I had taken over $250,000 worth of land and money when I left him, and the papers demanded that I pay that amount immediately. We never owned property together, had no kids, no shared bank account or credit cards. I took one suitcase of clothes and walked out of the one-room cabin we rented while he made $120,000 a year, and I made $20,000, all bills paid electronically by me. The response from the judge to his lawyer started, "I like to believe that our species will always have their feet planted firmly on the ground, but in what warped reality did you get caught up in? There is no basis nor proof of these claims by your client, and to bring them here shows your own blatant disregard for reality. I have some pocket lint here, and will offer it up to you, as I can see by the look on your face that you're concerned about collecting your client's fees now." For the next few years, he hounded me for money. I deleted all social media and moved a few times. Then he met a great woman, and I had to contact her because he continued sending me fake invoices for money. I sent her the proof, and she had no idea he was doing any of this to me. She quickly put a stop to it. She has been a blessing, and I thank her for the peace and quiet I now have. I expect to hear from her again when she eventually needs my help during her own divorce from him. I'll be there. Story 39. This was more during the divorce, but my ex was insistent that my issues with our relationship were caused by my depression, so he insisted I go into therapy and get back on medication. As we were finalizing the divorce, he sent me a bill for everything he had paid for during the time from when he broke up with me to when I was finally able to move out, which was ridiculous because he broke up with me and had said he'd continue to pay for things until I found a job. What really ground my gears was that the costs of the therapy sessions at $60 a session were included in the bill. It wasn't a lot compared to the total amount, and I had the money, but I said absolutely not, and had my lawyer tell him I would pay everything except those charges he accepted. But the audacity of asking for that money when it was his actions that caused my mental health to decline, and when he insisted I see a therapist was too much. I guess because the therapist hadn't sided with him, he decided it was worthless. After the divorce, the craziest thing he did was try to stare down my new boyfriend from across the room at a local pop culture convention. Like, my dude, you broke up with me. Why are you giving the guy who replaced you the evil eye? Get over it. Story 40. I know this will probably get buried, but what the hell? I'm not technically divorced, but my ex and I were common law married by Texas standards. We had a 1-year-old and had been renting a house together for a few months when my cousin moved down here from East Texas. Now, I'm an only child, and this cousin had been like a brother to me since a very young age. I'm sure you can figure out where this is going. He told me he didn't have a place to stay, so I offered him a room in our place with the stipulation that he helped with bills and bought some groceries. Everything was fine until about 4 months later when I came home from work one day and everybody's stuff was gone except for mine. Naturally, I called them both and eventually found out that they, meaning my wife and cousin, were now a couple and had moved out to their own place. Of course, I was very upset and still am, but one thing really sticks out to me for some reason. They took the trash can. I was fine with them taking the washer, dryer, TV, and whatnot, but the trash can, I had nowhere to throw things away. It might seem minor, but have you ever had to do without a trash can? It's a huge burden to have no place to put garbage. Story 41. A long-term ex-boyfriend moved into my underpriced San Francisco apartment with me. I had to add him to the lease since it was required for him to live there. He was extremely toxic and physically abusive, and somehow convinced the condo owner-washed landlord that he should get the apartment. The landlord told me to move out or he would evict me. My ex put about half of my belongings in about 40-plus paper Whole Foods bags and left them in the valet area of the building in the rain at around 3 a.m. As I learned from a doorman who was nice enough to text me, my friend who I was staying with went to get them. The next day we returned to get the rest of my stuff. My ex unknowingly filmed us packing and posted the videos on Facebook. Later, he came to the house where I was staying and confronted me on the sidewalk, punching me in the face. I finally got a restraining order. About a week later, he showed up at my friend's house with a weapon, broke down the door, and assaulted both of us, breaking my friend's arm, my nose, several facial bones, and my wrist. He worked as a district attorney prosecutor, so the police did nothing. I moved to another city and my friend had to move out of her home. He kept showing up even after she and her husband also got a restraining order against him.